So we begin the fourth and final part of our Simplicity series, sponsored by St. James United Church of Christ in Havertown, Pennsylvania. For this installment, I would like to begin with a quote from Sarah Sosanka from The Not So Big Life. And she says, "We are facing an enormous problem in our lives today. It's so big we can hardly see it, and it's right in front of our face all day. We're all living two big lives, crammed from top to bottom with activities, urgencies, and obligations that seem absolute. There's no time to take a breath, no time to look for the source of the problem." This final installment is a review of Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne, who is a family consultant and deals with a lot of children who face anxiety, who seem not to be functioning at home, at school. And over his years of experience with children and consulting with families, he's come up with a series of things that he thinks help create happier, calmer, and more secure kids. The first that he raises is the need to streamline the home environment. He recounts that the average child has 150 toys, and he offers tips on the amount of toys a child should have, books, and how to keep clutter at a minimum within a child's room. He also speaks about the need to address the overload of lights and sounds and other sensory items that crowd the space that young imaginations need in order to grow. 2, he talks about the need to establish rhythms and rituals. He talks about how children, in order to feel secure and safe, need some sense of predictability. So he talks about routines that may be developed in a child's life that add for that sense of security and peace and contentment. He talks about even the challenge of selecting clothes for a child for a school day and makes some recommendations about the night before and how to do that. Then he talks about a child's need for transparency. In order to feel safe, they need to know what's going to happen. What are the day's plans? And talks about even if a parents need to shift back and forth on who picks a child up from school or drops them off, the necessity of being able to talk with your child that night before, remind them the next morning, the where, the when, and the who of such a thing as a pickup. He talks about how this relieves the pressure valves that children often experience. He says there are ways to ease daily tensions, create battle-free meal times and bedtimes, and make suggestions on how to do some of that. And then he talks about how to tell if your child is overwhelmed, which I think could be very helpful for some parents who may not know that, and grandparents as well. He also talks about the need for scheduling a break in one's schedule, and talks about how too many activities may limit children's ability to motivate and direct themselves. He talks about the necessity of boredom for all people, and especially children, to learn to be creative. He has a fascinating conversation in the book in which he talks about whether drug addiction is currently about people trying to deal with their emotional pain. He does not deal with that in detail, but does present another possibility of why some people struggle with addiction. And he talks about that they've been so stimulated by outside things that when they move into a period in which they're not able to have that outside stimulation, whether they can muster that by being self-motivated to create and imagine and self-stimulate. And he talks about that he believes that some cause of addiction is related to people's inability to have learned how to self-stimulate. He later goes on to talk about organized sports and shares actually a bit of a disturbing statistic about how organized sports prove very beneficial in the teen years because developmentally they're at the place to be able to really gain a lot from team or organized sports. But he says that because in this country we are starting children so early in organized and team sports that they wind up quitting by the age of 9, 10, or 11, and then don't get the developmental benefit that can really come from organized sports during the teen years because they've quit before that. He talks about scaling back on media and how that when in media, everything is presented to you often, and you don't often have a chance to use your own imagination. So he talks about how to establish some guidelines there. And he talks also about the need to shield children from too much information that really is meant for adults. So he'll be as bold to suggest that parents should not watch the 6 or 6:30 news, but should wait till the child goes to bed and watch or read online the 10, 10:30, or 11 o'clock news. That often children get information that is not child appropriate and hear things that adults are able to manage, but children are not, and therefore impedes their happiness as well as their sense of safety and security. This is really a great book. It presents a lot of ideas, and if you'll read reviews online, not everyone agrees with it, but everyone agrees that it does spark your own thinking. So we do have this available in the resource library and will be available in October on the resource table in the social hall after worship. So we hope you'll take time to either check it out, read further online, or begin just these conversations that are raised by this book with others, parents and other grandparents that you know, and see if you indeed and your children or grandchildren may benefit from them.